So, poet and multimedia artist Diana Khoi Nguyen was born and raised in California. She is the author of The Chocolate Unless and the poetry collection Ghost of, which was awarded the 2019 Tufts Discovery Award and was a finalist for the National Book Award. Her poetry and prose have appeared widely in magazines and journals such as Poetry, American Poetry Review, and PEN America. In 2020, Nguyen collaborated with the Vietnamese diasporic women's collective, She Who Has No Masters, to produce a joint exhibit at the George S. and Dolores Dore Eccles Art Gallery in Salt Lake City. Currently, she teaches creative writing at Randolph College Low-Residency MFA and is an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. As a scholar, poet, essayist, and interdisciplinary artist, Jane Wong has been working on what she calls a poetics of haunting in Asian American studies through various modes, including the digital humanities component of her dissertation, which you can find at poeticsofhaunting.com. Her poems can be found in places such as American Poetry Review, Poetry, Agni, and Third Coast. And her essays have appeared in McSweeney's, Black Warrior Review, The Common, and the Georgia Review. The recipient of the James W. Ray Distinguished Artist Award for Washington Artists. Her first solo art show, After Preparing the Altar, the Ghosts Feast Feverishly, was exhibited at the Frye Art Museum in 2019. She is an associate professor of creative writing at Western Washington University. Of their collaborative project, Radical Altars to Alter, for which they received the Woodberry Poetry Room Creative Fellowship, they write, "This project focuses on altar spaces as a speculative means to alter the entangled past, present, and future. In this project, we endeavor to create radical altars as a space to honor and alter our relationship with our familial and literary lineage, conjuring joyful futurism. They plan to curate radical altars of evocative ephemera, conjuring voices across time and space, altars both personal and collective, gathering numerous sensory-based materials, glowing with possibility, as the way of seeing, receiving, feeding, and holding that which is not physically present." I dislike long intros, so I wish only to urge you to listen. Listen for ants, for bees, for interruptions, for silences, for eels, for elvers, for absences. Listen for the shadows of sentences, of phrases, of endings, unvoiced, unresolved, how they branch under the surface of meaning, how the ghosts of what's unsaid haunt the lines, an arresting restlessness. If you've ever lost a language, if you've ever lost the ability to dream in a mother or father tongue, or if you've lost it before you were born, if you've ever had to translate words from blood relations into English, if you've ever needed a dictionary to do so, if you've ever felt like you crash landed here, wherever here is for you, if fragments of the other world glow for you like radioactive jewels, if you've ever felt hungry, you will feel at home in these poems, home and unsettled. Buy their books. You need to see these poems on the page. It's a whole trip. And ask them about the Altar project after the reading. I'm going to stop talking now. Please listen.
Hi, thank you so much, Sam. And thanks for being here, folks. There's so many people I don't know. I just always assume nobody will be there. It's just gonna be like me and my dogs. I have like 2 heartbeats in my body right now, and they were beating in sync as you were talking. And I think that's a way in which like multiple generations feel seen. So thank you for that intro. And thank you to the Grolier Bookshop for having us. Thank you, James. And thank you for, just you guys. This is lovely. I love rainy days. So like, I'm really happy. I don't think I'm gonna read too much. I'm gonna read, Jane's gonna read, and then we're gonna start to like try out something that we just did today that we haven't done yet. So I guess I'm hyping it now. Shit. Okay, never mind. We're just gonna talk. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of dive in. The first piece I'm reading, oh my gosh, like when I did my MFA, I didn't know how to talk about like familial trauma, right? Like it's too vulnerable just to talk about the things that happened. So I was really obsessed with selkies, part-time seal, part-time Homo sapien, usually a naked woman. And then I like didn't look at that poem for like 15 years. And then I'm doing this new project that's working more with like the Vietnamese diaspora. And then like I changed it. So I'll read that to you. And I think I read it at a reading this summer. And then Camille Dungy like found the original version and emailed me to get the new one. I was so embarrassed that she could find, but anyway. But it's kind of cool. Anyway, I don't know why I just showed you that trajectory, but some poems take a journey, right? So that's kind of a theme. Selkie weaning young. Finding her hide we trailed, fingers down, then against, grains of fur thrusting shoulders into its waxy skin. This is how she found us, the past draped about us like a cloak, hands separating peach halves from a core. Her form in the sound, a pandan leaf peeking through milk. The only seals in Vietnam, American men with green faces. And then I'm just gonna read like a excerpt from a longer piece I'm kind of evolving. And Sam, I love that you were talking about like languages, because I was like, that's all I'm thinking about. I didn't know that my first language was Vietnamese until I started going through home video archives. And I was like, how come baby me talking like in that slang Viet talk? What is that? And then I was like, oh, that was my first language. And then my parents were worried I was going to be ESL in kindergarten. So we were told to only speak English. And then that just became a habit. And actually last fall, I started taking Vietnamese at the institution where I teach alongside like freshmen nursing majors, and yeah, and it's great. I love it because like I'm just like trying real hard. Everybody else is just embarrassed to speak, and we're all chastised by the same auntie, it's kind of like the best life. And then like at the end of semester we all go get pho together. It's really joyful. Okay. I don't have titles for anything these days, so I'm just calling everything Doi Moi, which is Vietnamese. In my understanding of the word, which is different from the official Wikipedia or like, economic understanding of the word, in my understanding, I think of it as like a new phase, a new time, a new period. And it does mean that in a sense, but it's specifically referring to kind of unofficially in the late 80s, but more officially in the early 90s, when economic kind of reform happened in Vietnam, which kind of opened and paved way for the economic situation with all the NGOs and everything in Vietnam today, which is not what I'm thinking about, but it's part of that too, right? I'm not going to pronounce some of the Vietnamese words correctly, just FYI. Doi moi, not doi moi, doi doi. So you must open yourself to it. I lost my first tongue when my parents forbade me from using it. At first, it was an equitable exchange of borders. They spoke to me in Vietnamese. I replied in English. Perhaps my parents thought that they were building a mini colony in a suburban cul-de-sac. Did you see that Asian family moving in? My neighbors must have asked one another. A bright yolk enclosed in a white, smooth-poured egg. It is through language that colonization quietly takes over one's imagination. I thought the Vietnamese word for faucet was robinet. For me, to be American is not to go back to Vietnam, but to fly there for the first time. In Vietnam, they immediately know where I am from. Voi nước, I looked it up. Tentacle for water, if you break down the phrase. My father's French Catholic school nudging him to wash his hands beneath the robinet. The nuns, they hit your left hand until you learn to write right-handed, he told me once. With a cul-de-sac, you have to exit where you entered, but there's space to turn around. A native egg exits the ovary, never turning back. Inside the womb, a fetus will turn and toss frequently during pregnancy. My brother took his life from the garage, a place where he arrived the day my parents brought him home from the hospital nursery. It may be best to decolonize my lost tongue before retrieving it. To do so, I need to rescind the tacit permission French took in entering my mouth. I will spit it out, spit it out, spit it out. But how to scrub the tentacle of imagination? In my faucet, there wages a war. Rages a war. Decolonization is not as simple as closing a door. It begins by picking up where my 4-year-old self left off. What will happen when I can tell my story in my mother tongue? I'm strolling with my father through the corridors of Jolong, eating an egg tart from one of the egg vendors. It's my first visit, my father's first since his flight. Spitting out of X to the first power's mouth, a bite of an egg tart mistaken for a lemon one. Spitting, the first white boy I loved said, "What was that?" The egg tart, a custard tart, emerged in the 20th century Canton from trade with Britain, east meets west. A variant in Macau emerged at the intersection of Cantonese and Portuguese colonizing influences. There's a dish originating in Hue, made of rice and tapioca flours, steamed in tiny saucers. Sometimes mashed mung bean is placed at the center of the soft white cakes. Bun bao. Doesn't it look just like a fried egg? My mother exclaims, stacking our empty dishes like poker chips. It's her first time back in the country after 37 years away, and she and my father have been spatting all the way up Vietnam's spine. I'm nearly as old as she has been gone, and it has been that long since I left her body. How many eggs remain? Eggs I still carry, eggs my mother carried and carrying me along? Or time, meaning that time has passed. Time passes. Concurrent with time, so many objects, persons, places drift along, passing those who do not move. You can change drastically even if you stand still. It's a Thursday in the only pub on the main street of a small town in central Pennsylvania. My trivia team is tied with an old biker one named the Merkins across the way. What is the name of the Japanese egg noodle dish? The host announces. As somebody filled with knowledge, often useless, a dish I know well lights up inside my mind. The Hiroshima variant, I want to say, and our team writes down okonomiyaki. But when the answers are revealed, the host says egg foo young. My face goes flat as an omelet. Happened. Oh my God. Anyway, I was really mad. Doi Moi, a restaurant I nearly walked past in DC. Quote, exploding with rich flavor and vibrant color, Doi Moi embraces the collision of Vietnamese and French culture, end quote. A Vietnamese street food joint reimagined through the gaze of others, then regurgitated under neon lights into bowls bigger than my face. There's nothing new about this place, and I would have stopped for a bite had the line not spilled out the door, snaking around the sidewalk patio. At Doi Moi, they garnish inverted conical bowls of pho with huge canoe-cut bones. Put a decorative bone in my bowl, and I'll use it as a weapon. Every year, I think you get angrier, the spouse says to me. Where do you want to go? A mid-50s law professor I met in France asked me as we ate pork belly buns outside of Jolon, modern Asian in downtown Denver. Jolon, because Chef Lon's, quote, extensive culinary travels throughout Asia, end quote. A menu boasting of, quote, inspired interpretations of traditional dishes found across the exotic Far East, end quote. We can go anywhere. I'll take you anywhere. Money's no object. How did I end up here? It was a week before I met my spouse, before moving to Denver for my PhD. You'll be a doctor, my mother sang, giddy at the prospect. If you travel far enough east, you'll end up in the west, then back east again. Directions, like all things relational, depend on where you are or who's telling you what. Territorial disputes continue in the South China Sea, or the Eastern Sea, as Vietnam calls it. I'm just gonna end there because it kind of continues. But
oh my gosh, thank you, Diana, for reading that new work. I'm so excited by it. Kind of also wish I chose prose to read, actually. My next book is actually prose. It's a memoir coming out from Tin House called Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, which for those of you who know, that's a Bruce Springsteen line. But anyway, so I was like, oh, I'm so inspired. Thank you all for being here. We're thrilled to be here, and it's kind of a little reunion between me and Diana as well. And so it just feels always so special to collaborate with you. And tomorrow we will be installing and doing more, magical things of yet to, I know you hyped it up, but I was just like, we deserve the hype. We deserve the hype. But super excited to be here in this beautiful bookstore. Yeah. And I love it already. I feel like I kind of want to cozy up in a corner like a cat. And Sam, it's such an honor to hear your words, to introduce us. And I was reading your book earlier today, so it just feels kind of like a really nice kind of way to connect. Like, when you meet someone later after you've read their work, it's just so special. Yeah, thank you all for being here. Thanks to everyone on Zoom too. I'm going to read some poems, and then I think we're going to do something. And we'll chat and, have a little Q&A. And yeah, I think I'll dive in. Actually, it's interesting. You read so much of, this piece about eggs, and there's so many eggs in my book, a lot, like so many, that I was like, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I should start with an egg poem. There's all the egg poems in here. But to fully understand the egg for me, so I come from a history of hunger and starvation, but also a history of gluttony. I grew up in a Chinese American takeout restaurant on the Jersey Shore next to Tony's Pizzeria, Burlington Coat Factory, and a party store. And I was just surrounded by food. I was just eating all the time. But I didn't know necessarily my family's history in the Great Leap Forward, which is 1958 to 1962, in which 36 million people starved in China. And, I was a bored kid in a restaurant, and I took an egg and I threw it in the parking lot just so I could hear the sound of it hitting a car, because that's delightful as a child. And my mom was like, you have no idea what you've done. And to waste an egg, it's just so, like, I didn't know the harm I've caused. And that my mom would get an egg if she was lucky on her birthday, or like, she was vegetarian. She would joke around that she was vegetarian to my then vegetarian boyfriend. But I'll start with the egg and I'll go elsewhere. But I wasn't planning on reading this, but might as well. There's tons of eggs coming along anyway. It's called The Egg, which is not a creative title. The egg, held to the nose, took me back to the field where my mother held a chicken's neck down with thin branch arms and struck its neck, that whimpering bridge between brain and heart with a cleaver as wide as a flooded river. Her reflection in the shine of it, her yolk-swamped eyes, the speckled pluck of her brow measuring the animal's past life. How it would stir in the mucus of this hull, touch its beak to the cool crater, testing it. How my brother and I yearn to lick the sugar spackle of an Easter egg, but we're told, no, not yet. I want to start with a poem called Everything. This is for you, Chen. Everything. Because the book is called How Not Be Afraid of Everything, so I kind of had to write the everything. So, okay. Everything. I am the type to go to bed with my feet dirty. A man calling from a balcony is not to be trusted. In 1988, the nation sings a song I can't understand, but I sing it because everyone looks at me like a thief and no one likes a thief. Algae gathers in plastic cups along the Jersey shore. The dull prongs of a fork still count as a weapon. I gather plastic cups along the shore and shake them out to use for tea, juice, a home for my toothbrush. The Pledge of Allegiance is a building ledge, an alleged crime, a leg crossed over another leg, a plea gone askew, a glance shared in a room with someone else who looks like you. Hundreds of toxic wild boars are roaming across northern Japan, and it would be a mistake to identify with them. In 1960, my grandmother holds no knife and no tall wheat. When washing her feet, my grandmother tells me she spent decades without shoes, wonders if the mud misses her. I am a good daughter, and I can repeat this indefinitely without taking a breath. Often, I call out to myself just to hear an echo, to hear something moving in the walls like a healthy family of rats. My mother has been told repeatedly, you can't walk here. Here is a white stone, a white fence, a white seagull, a white jug of milk, a white candle, a white duvet, a white patio, a white bar of soap to wash your mouth out. Sometimes I dream in Cantonese, and I have no idea what is being said. Thinking about language again. You grow to love what you create, pouring out of your mouth. In 1988, my father sees his reflection in the rearview mirror and identifies with the blood moon lighting his way to Atlantic City. From a balcony, a man yells at me, "You need some white dick," and I turn into a boar. My father disappears for weeks and my mother keeps weeding the garden, pulling cigarettes from the splintering tomatoes I will devour. I study asymptotes for months and dream in curves, almost but never touching. My mother writes in her ESL diary for night school, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I. And her ESL teacher only gives her a check, so I give her a check plus. To be a good daughter means to carry everything with you at all times, the luggage of the past lifted to the mouth. When we look at each other, my mother laughs like an overripe tomato on a windowsill. In 1989, I spent months assembling a puzzle map of the United States of America, and the teacher said, "Good job, Jane." And then slower and louder like a drowning sloth, "Good job, Jane." And I did not touch a single piece. Bloody drunk in a blood moon, my father fights with another gambler and jabs at his arm with a dull fork, and they both laugh celestially. During elementary school, I didn't say a single word, not even when called upon, and thus the teachers and administrators decided I could not speak English because they looked at me. Mao Zedong explains math. In geometry, I just drew a picture of an egg. That was enough geometry for me. Real quote. My grandfather was jailed by the Red Army sometime between 1966 and 1976. And my mother says, I saw him cry when I tried to visit. He wanted to eat the bow I made for him. Algae gathers, gleaming like a jewel on the head of my 5th grade betta fish. Counter-revolutionaries during the Cultural Revolution are likened to finding a bone inside an egg. I was born healthy in the year of the rat. The man on the balcony invests in a foldable set of 2 chairs and 1 table in eggshell white, mold resistant, perfect for outdoor use. I was 10 when I willed a rock to fall off the ledge just by staring at it long enough. And that poem has some Chinese in it. And I always get asked, like, why don't you read the Chinese? And I was like, I said I can't, right? Sometimes I dream in Cantonese, I have no idea what's being said. It's like, I can't do it. And so anyone who actually can read the Chinese, it's probably pretty warped because it's Google Translate. And I hope that people know that because it's warped. It's not correct. But I just think that's kind of funny. I would love to be as brave as you to take a language class. They don't teach Cantonese or Toisanese. It's only Mandarin, which says something. So I'm just like, but yeah, maybe I should get a tutor and then we can all eat hot pot afterwards and just like living your pho dream. I'll try to do it. I'm gonna read a few more poems. I think I'm going to read, let's see, there's this one poem that is kind of, well, there's an orange here. And I was thinking about this, you know, we both are very interdisciplinary artists, and we've been kind of doing a lot of experiments, I think, with art and kind of recent. And I did have a Fry show at the Fry Art Museum in 2019. I have a show currently, if anyone somehow wants to go to Canada, at the Richmond Art Gallery in Richmond, BC. It's up till April 3rd. And it's kind of like poetry sculpture. But this poem here and a few others from this book have also been reimagined as performance, or as, you know, if I was like Zoom Life, I'd screen share, but that's just kind of like, I'm so used to that. But there's this one, you know, this is one poem here that I am obsessed with watching videos of fruit rotting. I don't know if anyone else has seen this, or if this is like, I feel like some people are like, no, and some people are like, yes, I've definitely seen it. So you understand then, but time-lapse videos. And I kept watching this one where this orange kept, you know, decomposing, and thinking about eggs, but also thinking about oranges in this book. My grandmother lives in the Central District in Seattle, and she'll go to the Asian grocery store and she'll buy all the cheap fruits and vegetables that are about to rot. They basically bag it up for $1 and she buys them. And I tell her, it's like, you know, I'm the first in my family to finish high school, go to college, etc. And I was like, Popo, I can get you a good orange, like a nice orange. And she was like, no, I don't need a nice orange. If I don't eat this, then nobody will. And so I just kept thinking about that. And then the orange kind of rotting. So this is for my grandma. What is love if not rot? I've been watching videos of rotting oranges on time lapse again. It's barely noticeable at first. The pores begin to grow, craters of no importance. After 14 days, the skin thins out, rice paper thin, wind thin, loneliness thin. At 15 days, spots bloom like a newborn galaxy or a bald buzzard circling a shadow returning winter's wail. The skin puckers in on itself, all chimney ash, all brain matter mold. The middle like touching a young organ, slobbering milk and mud, a pedestal of goldenrod flora at 17 days. At 20 days, moss lumbers up and through, continents growing along this orb, thickening at 22 days like cotton lint from the dryer, like fur, a sheepskin cloud like my mother, an animal in her own right, expanding now. The color is phlegm yellow, poor yellow, growing smaller and smaller by 25 days, collapsing upon itself like curled fists, how I sleep at night, returning to heartbreak after heartbreak. Fruit flies fluttering about like snow. What is holding it up still? What is keeping it here? How can I bear to watch it? How can I liquefy by 45 days, wolfish in citrus murk, ever shrinking like every grandparent I've ever held hands with? At 85 days, how to hold this slush of glittering bees trapped in no worldly amber. Shout out to my grandma, my one surviving grandparent. I think I'm going to just read a couple more and then we'll kind of do something and chat. I have been writing these letters. As I mentioned, this book is really entangled with the Great Leap Forward, but also me, and there's a lot of heartbreak in here, a lot of terrible ex-boyfriends, pretty much. But when I was in college, I took a Chinese politics class, and yeah, I learned about the Great Leap Forward through that class. And it's really that horrible moment, you know, when your homework is your life and you're just like, what? And I ran away from class. I didn't go back for a while, and really reckoning with this history that, you know, my grandparents' generation, my grandfather was orphaned, and he was adopted by an older man whose family also disappeared. So we use the term disappeared, but really it is starvation. And you know, I was probably in that class back in like 2000, maybe 2004 or something. And it took me this long to really kind of write through it. So it's been a long time. And I thought I'd just write them letters and try to talk to them. So I'll read a couple of the letters to them, and then I'll give you their answer, which is really joyful. So I'll kind of end there. When you died, I went to the library to find you. I stained a book on Maoist era politics with the tomato soup I had microwaved earlier, and it crusted the page like a ridge in the Grand Canyon, or the surface of Mars in love, or an army uniform cratered in the blood of others. I'm sorry. I don't know which analogy to use, what to say to the fact of it all. 36 million deaths from 1958 to 1962, estimated, what no one talks about, called epidemic, not starvation. And my grandmother's grave in Jersey, the grounds was as soft as a perfectly poached egg, and I almost plunged my arms into the soil to touch her, her purple jade bracelet shining like the ring of an undiscovered planet, or a truant yam among all this empty clay, all this empty, I'm sorry to give you that hope. I did not plunge my arms into the earth. I held these Safeway flowers dipped in bleach and blue, these wrinkled petal faces drifting in gasoline, air, this yawning gap between us all. The more things change, what remains the same? And yeah, just like Diana, always true story. You know, what happens when the archive is literally a ghost? Because you're thinking about what is kind of censored. And like me researching while eating tomato soup, like I was being gluttonous while reading about starvation. Just that juxtaposition is wild. I'll read a few more. This is kind of from a prose section in the book. Once, when I was 4, I poured carnation condensed milk all over my face. I was as white as I'll ever be. Eyelashes of cream I blinked on too ghostly for my own good. I admit it too. I've pitched eggs into parking lots just because I like the sound, the sumptuous splat of sun. I am sorry for drooling. I know, what a shame, what a waste. This hasty child's not mine. And what a taste, too, that oil spooled in gracious gravel. I want to tell you, I dated a vegetarian for 2 years, and he was as tall as a factory. When he went out to dinner with my family, table heaped with meatheads, how ugh. My mother said she was also vegetarian growing up, meaning poor, meaning scallions sprouting out of everyone's mouths. If you were lucky, there would at least be sprouting. As a teenager, my mother worked in a factory a few hours away from her village, embroidering luxurious birds, peacocks, herons, swans, anything but pigeons. I closed my eyes and imagined my mother's factory collapsing, pin needles studding the sky. I had this strange feeling. I've written this before. I've always been writing to you, even before I was born. Everything reminds me of you, and I don't even know what your face looks like. Your ears, are they as large as mine? Bats in an otherwise carnivorous world is even better than the original cavernous world, but carnivorous is better. See, poems are never finished. I finish each heaping grain, glossy-eyed and heart-hurtling to an end. A bowl cracks open then. What I am learning, beware of the light you cannot see. Skipped around a bit, because what is the past, present, future? I'm gonna just finish with this poem and then we'll kind of do something. I wrote these letters to them, and this is what they have to say back. This actually came as a complete rush, 2 hours. I co-wrote it clearly with ghosts, so I will say that. It's duende, like it's something happened to me. It's called After Preparing the Altar, the Ghosts Speak Feverishly, which is a mouthful to say, and purposely so. And they just want to have a gigantic party. And this was actually reimagined as a gigantic table, probably the size of this room. It's pretty big. It's a giant golden table, and the poem's actually in bowls. And so it doesn't have a beginning or end, and you have to walk around the table to read the poem. And again, that was at the Fry and currently at the Richmond Art Gallery. After preparing the altar, the ghost speaks feverishly. It begins with a quote from Audre Lorde, which is how hard it is to sleep in the middle of a life. We wake in the middle of a life hungry. We smear durian along our mouths, sing soft death a lullaby. Carcass breath, eros of licked fingers and the finest perfume. What is love if not rot? We wear the fruit's hull as a spiked crown, grinning in green armor. Death to the grub, fat in his milky shuffle. Death to the lawlessness of dirt. Death to mud and all its false chocolate. To the bloated sun, we want to slice open and yolk all over the village. We want a sun-drenched slug feast, an omelet loosening its folds like hot jello. We want the marble fat of steak in all its swirling pink galaxies. We want the drool, the gnash, the pluck of each corn kernel, raw and summer swell. Tears welling up oil. Order up pickled cucumbers, piled like logs for a fire, like fat limbs with pepper and succulent in. Order up shrimp chips curling in a porcelain bowl like subway seats. Grapes peeled from bitter bark, almost translucent like eyes we would rather see. Little girl, what do you leave, leaven in your sight? Death to the open eyes of the dying. Here there's so many open eyes. We can't close each one. No, we did not say the seamed eye of a fish. No eyelets fluttering like no butterfly wings. No purple yam lips. We said eyes, still and resolute as a heartbreaker. Does this break your heart? Look, we don't want to be rude, but we want seconds, please. We want globes of oranges swallowed whole like a basketball or Mars or whatever planet is the most delicious. Slather Saturn, ferment Mercury, lap up its film of dust. Seconds, thirds, fourths, meat wool, a bouquet of chicken feet. A garden of melons monstrous in their bowls, prune back nothing. We purr in this garden. We comb through berries and come out so blue. Little girl, lasso tofu, the rope slicing its belly clean. Deep fry a cloud so it tastes like bitter gourd, or your father leaving, the exhaust of his car charred. Serenade a snake and slither its tongue into yours and bite. What is love if not knotted in garlic? Child, we move through graves like eels, delicious with our heads first, our mouths agape, our teeth little needles to stitch a factory of everything made in China. You ask, are you hungry? Hunger eats through the air like ozone. You ask, what does it mean to be rootless? Roots are good to use as toothpicks. You, how can you wake in the middle of a life? We shut and open our eyes like the sun shining on tossed pennies in a forgotten well. Bald, clopper, blood, you Choi bolts into roses down here. While you were sleeping, we woke to the old leaves of your backyard shed, and then we ate that. And then we ate one of your lost flip-flops too. In a future life, we saw rats overtake a supermarket with so much milk we turned opaque. We wake to something boiling. We wake to wash dirt from lettuce to blossom into your face, aphids along the lashes. Little girl, don't forget to take care of the chickens squawking in their mess and stench. Did our mouths buckle at the sight of you devouring slice after slice of pizza in the greasy box too? Does this frontier swoon for you? It's time to wake up. I want you to wake the tapeworm who loves his home. Wake the ants and let them do a spoonful of peanut butter. Tell us, little girl, are you hungry, awake, astonished enough? I need a sip of-
Do you want to talk about it?
What? We'll talk about it after. How's that?
Clearly.
Let's do it.
Okay.
We set out to create altars to alter our past, present, and future. In doing so, we realize we must alter the archive.
Who you be, what you want. Kathy Parkholm.
The archive should be living, should be a hive of gluttonous bees, chives sprouting tentacles green in the refreshed glass. The archive should be the anemone foot.
Now free me quickly before I destroy us. Audrey Lorde.
I'm currently staring at a book entitled The Pound Era. Who gets an era? White men think they own time.
But here we are in this American room full of American poets. We are American poets too, except no one looks like us. Sam Cha.
I don't have a card. I don't have an email. I don't have a password. I don't have a map. I have half this orange.
Pulling onions out of the garden in anger. Maxine Hong Kingston.
Who isn't a part of the archive?
We should be grateful for her survival. Alice Walker.
Diana and I, we looked for each other in the poetry room. Somehow we are here, leaving strands of our black hair. But our books, where are they?
Pull it out. Pull it out. The silence. Sujata Bhatt.
How must I touch you across all this? This is not home.
When I wanted them dead, I killed them. Lucille Clifton.
That's it.
We describe like so they okay. I'm just like are people confused? Okay. So we spent a lot of time, well not a lot of, well before we came here and also with the non-digitized kind of audio archives, just kind of listening, in particular paying attention to kind of BIPOC voices and just allowing them to pass through us and jotting them down. We had ideas about how do we engage the audience. Anyway, and we were also, this is just Harvard, I guess. I mean, it took us a lot of different steps to get access into buildings and archives. And I was just thinking, it's not just Harvard, but just institutions, because I work a lot with oral history in the Vietnamese diaspora. You cannot access that like as a stranger through the internet. You have to like travel and get permissions and have IDs, you know, and there's, it's such a barrier, I think, of access to the archive. And so I was thinking about like, we got to sneak these voices out, you know? So we did. And so that was kind of part of just like allowing for us to be the instrument for their voices, to carry them with us. And then like also like what other voices are we going to sneak into that space tomorrow too, you know? Who gets to be archived, who has been archived. So we're just thinking about archive in that way in terms of access, that we can open a kind of threshold to hold and as a portal. So this is kind of what we're thinking so far. I don't know if you wanted to.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's funny, even earlier we were trying to go to the restroom, I think in
the commons.
The commons, or you know, and we had to like use our card to go into a bathroom to it was just like everything was access, right? A matter of access. And we've been thinking about that a lot. And it's funny, like Diana and I are very process-based friends and collaborators, and you know, you always set out to do something in a project and it can always change at any point. It's funny that we were thinking about alters with an A, and how alters can alter you know, the way that we can imagine to the past, present, and future. But we didn't include necessarily the idea of what it means to alter the archive, right? What does it mean to keep that not static, to keep it moving? What can move in and out of the archive? And so as Diana said, like it is a threshold point in which we're thinking about, you know, who can we sneak into the poetry room, like who isn't there, you know, and even thinking too, as we'll be creating an actual altar space too in there, but also thinking about how do we create that as the archive is something that is living, as something that is you know, breathing and not running up against closed doors and access and cards and email passwords and all of that. So we've been thinking about that. We've been dreaming this up. We have a lot of ephemera stuff that we're planning on tomorrow to install, which will document. So you should all be able to see what we've created. And we'll take a lot of photos, etc. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been working on, and I'm excited to kind of, you know, hear your questions, your thoughts. And again, we're very process based. It's been kind of yeah, kind of on our minds. And I think you think about those three magic words of alter, archive, alters, you know, have been kind of circling around us like little crows this whole day. So yeah, and this was actually you know, little bits of things we were talking about, thinking about during the day, but also some of the lines we drew from the audio that we watched through cassette tape and you know, VCR, etc. CDs, and just kind of interwove them to kind of create this kind of I don't know, a much more tender questioning, I suppose. Yeah.
Also like alter spaces where ghosts, living and deceased, converge too with our own thoughts, even if we don't directly converse, right? So I think we're thinking about that as well. Yeah, so like wonderful just to be with the voices, those voices, not other voices. I was just thinking like schizophrenia. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if you
do you want to talk with us? Like
questions.
We're in progress, so yeah. Do you want to offer something to our altar? I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question. So when you're talking about kind of bringing voices in and out, how you're smuggling them in a sense into these archives, I was wondering, when you encounter issues in terms of like translation or not being able to understand the voice, even though it might be that of your family, of your ancestors, how do you move and carry a voice that you might not understand?
I mean, I think about this all the time. Like, I think of actually my mother as like the OG poet in my life, though she would never say that she's a poet, but she speaks in like metaphors and things that I just, you know, she'll be like, you know, Jade, open the cage and eat the flowers. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you trying to say?
It's wonderful.
Right. But like, how could I sneak that into the room? Like, how can she hold space in what we define as what poetry is, right? Although it may not mean that she has an MFA or that she has a published book or anything of that sort. Like, how do I do that? And I can literally call her up tomorrow and like record her voice. right? And that could be something that we layer, right, to bring in again a voice that is not wouldn't necessarily, you know, be at Harvard. And I think that, you know, that, I mean, I have a lot of complicated feelings about upward mobility myself, and I think that's a part of it, and thinking about, again, access. But I don't know if you want to add or answer that. This is a great question.
I have not something I'm going to do because I'll get in trouble. So I'm going to share it because I'm not going to do it. So you guys will all hold me accountable. The first thing I was thinking about is like, there's nonverbal things too. There's the translatable, and then there's also the untranslatable, which are like the silences, right? The gaps, the gestures that occur between people. And I feel like working with image and photographic archive is also a way of kind of like capturing that kind of space, but also like photographs there's what's in the photograph and like what's outside the photograph that's not there, that's also kind of vibrating kind of around it. I'm thinking about Tina Comp's like listening to images. So that's a way of thinking about like, how can we bring it, like the non-textual stuff into that space, and also making space for silence too, right? I think a lot can happen there, which I think poets know about, of course. We wield silence. Okay, so the story that I was thinking about, I was like, oh, I'd love to do it, but I don't want to get in trouble, so I won't do it here. Maybe I'll do it somewhere else where nobody knows me. I think it was on This American Life, but there was like this young boy who made a book, like at home, you know? And then he like put it in the library.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to be in the library. And then people started checking out this book. And it became like the wait list for it was like 3 years long. And then like they like gave, I think like the librarian like gave it I don't know, like Dewey Decimal. I don't know, but like I love it.
Yeah.
Like he just like wanted to, and he made it happen. I would totally do that at other libraries.
You know, it's
not like my own book, but like I would just put some other people, like my mom's saying or something, like in a page somewhere, and one day somebody will find it. I won't do this, Christina. I won't do this. Are you saying I can't do this?
I wanted to be clear. I'm gonna get choked up, but
I know you do. I
I
know.
nearly lost my job.
I know.
Every year I fight for access. Every year. I mean, just yesterday, just to get those cards. I mean, I fight. And so I would like to distinguish what the poetry seeks in a hierarchical situation.
Yeah.
I've not just almost lost my job, I've lost my poetry, I've lost everything fighting for this right, for these voices to emerge and be preserved. And I welcome everyone to be there tomorrow, whatever.
All right.
Okay,
So we
dot,
have
dot.
Now we know we have a third co-conspirator. We weren't sure.
Please, I hope this mask is not related to how we rejoice in your presence. But I need to understand that I find myself in a context that is in resistance to the very nature of welcome, but everything in my effort at a great cost to our well-being as poetry in this effort. And I'm so grateful.
Oh, we're so grateful to be in that room.
Yes.
Yeah, with
So
you.
please, it is
Okay.
an invitation to remember.
Other people's words will appear
Yeah.
at some point in a year, a
Yeah.
future time.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and
Yeah.
I think that, you know, because like, you know, as we're mentioning, we're very process-based, and even thinking about like, oh, this is what we had planned on doing, but this had been on our minds, like even thinking about like who are these powers that be that are the kind of, you know, restricting, right, those the desire to grow it into something else. And the ways in which, that's funny that you mentioned that kind of like, sneaking a book in the shelves is that's actually something I did as a child. Like I grew up in the restaurant and the public library was across the street, and my mom would drop me off there for like 6 hours, aka free babysitting. Back in the 80s, where you could just drop off children in random places and just let someone watch them, I guess, the librarians. But I was so frustrated by, I was a big reader, which again, I was stuck in ESL. They put me in the class. They didn't think I spoke English, but then I was like reading books in English. So it was very confusing. So they always were like, door, Jane, door. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyhow, I was such a voracious reader, but I just didn't see books that reflected my existence. And so I did that. I actually wrote alternative stories and little drawings and things and slipped them into books. I hid them in there. And I don't know who found them. I don't know if the librarian pulled them right out. But it was an immediate, I knew from a young age that I wasn't going to be part of the bookshelves. And that made me angry and even want to be on the bookshelf even more. And even thinking about that, especially for me and Diana, like what it even means to have these books out in the world. It means everything. And, that's easy to say, but it really does. It does feel kind of like we've been fighting against so many things along our journey. And we've known each other for quite a long time. And just to see them, always next to each other, it just makes me really kind of know that there was someone else trying to maybe do the same thing as me as a child. And here we are, adults, kind of trying to stir stuff up amongst the clementines. Yeah. Chen.
Thinking about access, I'm just thinking of the word permission and the difference between like institutional permission, which is social access. But thinking about the multilingual, I was struck by how both of you talked about, right? Because I used to think I had to be fluent to write or incorporate another language that is part of my life, right? I was just so moved by how we just dove into it, right? And so I'm wondering, how did you find that permission, or give yourself that permission, or create that permission to start where you are with your relationship to language?
Mine is quite a boring tale, but you could try it, like method living, method acting, right? Sorry, I was just telling my students, method writing, be a badger. I don't know. Yeah, they're like, do it safely, don't eat weird bugs. Somebody did do that, but that's another conversation. Moving through, when I started to travel through Vietnam with my father and then alone, when I had access, right, to resources to do that, like memories started to come back. It was very confusing because my memory didn't recall those things, but language reminded me that I knew it. But it was also different from Google Translate, but also different from what people were saying on the street. It's just confusing, right? Like you have your own personal etymology and evolution. And when I went to sleep, like the words that people said became a mixture. And so when I wrote, it emerged. But I think the permission was like allowing my body to enter into that liminal space of like, oh, here I am, American Vietnamese. And actually the word for Vietnamese American in Vietnamese is apparently, it's like a person who is American, but like whose people come from Vietnam, which is very different from my mom. If for my mother to be a Vietnamese American, it's like the other way, it goes the other way around. So like even in the language, syntactically indicates the displacement. And so all of those things are swirling, and because we're writers, like it emerges on the page. So maybe try, I mean, when we can move and circulate.
Be the badger.
Be the badger. Go to Badgerland. I don't know.
No, I love that. I feel like I feel very much like a badger most of the days, and a raccoon. But I was thinking about language actually in my Poetics of Haunting project, which I did in 2016. It's still up. So if you want to just go to poeticsofhaunting.com, Diana was also a part of that, as well as a ton of wonderful poets like Banu Kapil, etc., Sally Wenmao. And I went to Teresa Hawkyung Cha's kind of archive space at the Berkeley Pacific Archive. I'm getting the name a little mixed up, but there's this one video of hers. I think it's called Mouth to Mouth, that I got to view, and it's just a close up of a mouth, and there's this kind of feeling of like the painfulness of language and the painfulness of how to speak it when it's always slipping away from you. And as part of the Poetics of Haunting project, you know, because I think so much of what Diana and I do in even thinking about multidisciplinary form or digital humanities is vulnerable. Like I was like, I can't just write about this. I can't just like think about this. I need to do it. And so there's this audio of me that's incredibly uncomfortable, of me making up a poem on the spot in Toisanese with whatever Toisanese I know, which is very little, and like baby Toisanese, which is a dialect of Cantonese. So it'd be even harder to see if I could learn that, right? Definitely not in an institutional setting. But that particular video, if you listen to me try to compose this poem on the spot in Toisanese, I'm whispering, and it's funny because I'm not necessarily a whispering person, but it sounds kind of creepy and like scared and just like I'm shaking. And I didn't realize that until after I recorded it, that I was scared of my Toisanese. I was scared. And there's a moment in there, I'm pretty sure, in which, you know, I say like, Wong Meng Hai, like my name is, you know, Jane or whatever, but it comes out as like Gao Meng, which means like kind of like help. So like when things are off, like that wasn't my intention, but like I got the words mixed up for my name is and help, you know, and just like what it means to kind of apologize. I also apologize profusely in that piece, which came out, there's different ways, right, in different languages where something you'll say something in a formal tone and other times in more of a slang, and I'm just like apologizing continually formally. It's almost kind of like I'm hitting my head over and over again, but I had to do it, and I had to like write that, and it's really uncomfortable. Like I would never, I'm too uncomfortable to play it for you. That's how uncomfortable I am. But I did post it there, so I'm just kind of like, like I did it. Just don't look at it too closely. But I think that that's, you know, with anything, I feel like, you know, the closer you get to its like vibrating center of like the fear of something being lost, that's when it gets really, I think, good, I guess, for me to kind of reflect on what language means to me and what language loss means. But yeah, it's a beautiful question.
Yeah, thank you for these questions.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time for another, or how the chat's doing too. I wasn't sure what's happening on the Zoom.
I'm gonna scope it out after. Also don't want to hold people hostage.
Yeah.
Some people like celebrate leprechauns or something.
Oh, right.
Isn't that like a thing? I don't know.
Well, we have a question in the chat.
Oh.
There are a lot of ideas about how memory formation is shaped by, and in some theories, dependent on language. How do you both consider this relationship between language and access to memory as you explore Vietnamese and Cantonese language, respectively? How does this relate to access to memory within the archive?
Ooh, I love that. So you go ahead.
It hasn't activated for me in the archive yet because I'm working primarily with video and photography. And I'm still mostly illiterate in Vietnamese, although I have access to like ancestral translations. So I think part of the language classes are an attempt to access that, because you know, there's this thing where your family members, they go, oh yeah, you had a great grandfather who was a poet, and I'm like, whatever. But like he exists and he has a Wikipedia page and he was like translated to French. I know, So I'm like, oh, it's like a real person. And then like the last time I came home, my mother showed me a picture of him with like my grandmother's him. So there's a person who exists, and I was like, I wanted to be able to translate him from French, but also from Vietnamese. Also, like, who was he? How did he like? So I'm trying to reach towards that, and I'm interested in the complicated nexus of his languages. Sorry, that was like, but mostly I've been working the visual archive, which is a nonverbal. So I'm trying to. There's a kind of translation that happens that I'm writing in like between languages in my response to the archive. I think it's activated in that way. I don't know.
I mean, I think that memory is really slippery. You're not able to hold on to it. The instant that you try to remember something, it transforms. It's always going to change again and again. And again, maybe that's my memory of like when I could say "ngõ mèng ai" versus "gao mèng a," like this. Like I was like, aren't they the same? In my memory, it's like who said that too out loud to me to teach me to say that too. I don't know, but I was also thinking about the ways in which memory gets like passed down over multiple generations, and like basically more bluntly the lies that occur. Let's be honest here, my mom is like a wonderful liar. Like she just and I've been actually working on my memoir, and just like she is so great at lying, but in a beautiful way that makes you feel like seen. And like she'll say and again, I come from a very like, my mom's a postal worker, and she works night shift, and she's trying to give me money, right, when I go home, and she's just trying to sneak money and say like, oh, here's $100. And so I asked her once, I was like, don't you give me money, you didn't sneak any money into my suitcase, did you? And she said, no. Yo, why would I do that? Why would I do that? It's such a weird thing to do.
It is.
And of course, like open it up, it's just like between my underwear, like, and I'm just like, she lied again, like, but and she does it, she's just like heckling in the background, like, ha ha ha, like, so like I feel like she has altered so many of our memories of things over time, of me growing up, that it becomes almost this fantastical, I guess, childhood, so that I don't know what's fact and fiction anymore. And I will also say, like, my father, who's not my life, pretty much gambled the restaurant away, hence Atlantic City in the title of the memoir. And it was his restaurant. And so my mom decides one day to take all the photos, all of them, of the restaurant and throw them away. Minus one, which is a picture of me and my mom in the restaurant. Everything else, she's like, see ya. And I'm like, memories. I was like, they're gone. And she's like, they're just photos. I don't care about them. And even thinking about that has shifted now. I can't return to photos and say, oh, I remember that, whatever, because they activate, right? You look at photos, artifacts, stuff, images, a necklace, they activate. But once they're gone, right? Like we embed power into those things. And once they're gone, that memory feels almost like it's gone or it's shifted. And so when my mom did that, like, I was like, did she know that she would like loosen that memory of the restaurant from me? She probably did. She did not like the restaurant at all. She had no fond memories of the restaurant. And that was her doing, right? And I respect her decision to do that. That's what she needed. But I do wish I'd had some photos of the restaurant. But I think it's so sweet that she saved one, just one. It's me and her, and you can't even see the restaurant. It's just my gigantic, some of you've seen this picture, it's my gigantic fat baby face. And then my mom's head right there. And in the background, you kind of see pots and pans, but that's it. So it's like zoomed in on us, and the restaurant doesn't even exist. It's the only one she's kept. So that's a weird answer to that question, but I feel like memories you can alter it, you can change it. It's just kind of scary and beautiful at the same time, but complicated for sure.
And it's collaborative. Totally.
I think about that all the time, but yeah, I love that.
We could probably talk about memory for a long time, but I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming and being here. Earlier to shop, and also to the poetry room for kind of doing the deep hard work of I was thinking about like, what is the archive? These are big questions to ask, but important ones to ask. And we'll keep tinkering. We're going to document a lot of the installs, so it's temporary, so it will be gone pretty much the end of the day, Friday.
Yeah,
But we'll have
in
it.
some ways, it's also not static, but it's like that it moves
It
through other
moves.
spaces.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Is it possible to kind of see what you're doing?
Oh,
You have to have an ID.
Okay, so maybe not.
I mean, oh god.
wait,
Oh. Okay, just kidding. Oh. Then that's great. I didn't know because I know in the building you had to swipe, but oh great. Then yeah.
yeah, we'll
Right?
just,
I
I
don't
think
know.
so. I mean, I think, even if you, we'll definitely document as much as we can, in particular video, so we were able to kind of move and see through it, but yeah,
We don't know
It's
like
open.
what time or what.
like our schedule.
It'd be
It'd
like
be terrible.
this.
It's like if you show up and it's just like, oh, we're just like
But there's a
eating.
banana.
Yeah, like a banana.
There'll be some bananas.
Is that gonna go to like the Haunting Products website? I'm just wondering where.
We might create a whole separate
Yeah, I think we should.
website.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll create our own.
Because we've
space
done
for it.
multiple altars
Yep.
in other spaces.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time. I think it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to give acknowledgement to Woodberry because without them, these two
Yes.
poets wouldn't be reading here tonight. So I
Yeah.
want to give,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Great reading. We have books for sale. The poets will be signing over here. Everyone can move their chairs up against the wall.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi to people on Zoom.
Aw, thanks so much for coming, Chen. I know you just come from teaching. That's like a lot. So I can get this.
I see that book. I know that book. Oh yeah, I saw you didn't reach on it.
That's
Kind of
okay.
moved on emotionally.
No, I totally understand.
I would love to. I just, you mind if I do that? Here. Okay.